Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I wanted to talk about some X factors for this upcoming NBA season. These are a handful of players that I think are going to have a lot to do with some of the more significant events in the NBA this upcoming season, whether that be potential award races, whether that be some surprise teams in either conference, whether that be who ends up winning the title, or just who ends up having really, really good seasons. All these players are going to be involved in that potentially this year, and they're going to be some of the more interesting players in the entire league to be paying attention to this year, and that's what I want to be talking about in today's video. But quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every single day, so it's a great place for consistent NBA content. You can also leave a like rating on the video as well. It helps me out a ton. It lets me know that you're enjoying this content and helps it get out to more people on YouTube as well. And you can hang out with me at various socials at the bottom of the screen, and those are down in a link tree down in the description below as well. But with those things said, we'll go ahead and begin the list. There are 6 players on this list, and we're just going to get right to it with the first one. It's Zion Williamson. When I talked about the Pelicans in my Western Conference preview video, I didn't necessarily gloss over the Pelicans, but I maybe didn't go too much in depth to how I really felt about how good they could be this upcoming season because I had so many other teams to cover. But Zion specifically and the Pelicans in general are two really interesting things to keep an eye on for this season because they have this great future that a lot of people are focusing on, right? And rightfully so, with Zion, Brandon Ingram, all these picks. But there's a scenario, there's a world in which this is a playoff team this year and potentially a dangerous one, depending on the health and the fit of Zion Williamson. I personally, maybe you guys disagree, I don't think the talent is in question here for Zion. I think he's arguably one of, if not the most talented young players in the entire league. It's all about health and utilization and what his role ends up being in the league. Is he a 3? Is he a 4? Is he someone that moonlights at the small ball 5? Is he a primary ball handler type guy? Is he mostly working in transition? Is he working on the offensive and the defensive glass primarily? What set of skills is going to end up being most useful and fit really well within this roster? Those are still some things that we need to find out about Zion, but there's a scenario in which he's really, really good this year if he's healthy. There's a scenario in which he's an all-star. There's a scenario in which he is a perennial all-NBA guy throughout his entire career. And when you look at the rest of this Pelicans roster, they really just need a ceiling raiser. Brandon Ingram is really, really good. Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams are solid veteran NBA players. They've got guys like JJ Redick on the roster as well. And if they get one ceiling raiser, one other guy alongside Brandon Ingram that is an absolute star, this could be a playoff team despite the fact that this is going to be a really tough Western Conference. So Zion is someone that, as always, we're going to be keeping an eye on, right? But specifically with this X Factor conversation, I think some of the attention has kind of fallen off of him, and I'm not sure that's completely fair. Next up now is another one that we've talked about this player a good amount, but has kind of fallen on the back burner and is going to have a lot to do with how the season goes in the Eastern Conference this year. And it's Victor Oladipo. This is a guy that is obviously incredibly motivated to have an awesome year this year. I still think there's a scenario in which Victor Oladipo is really, really good this year and earns himself a max contract in the summer of 2021. We'll kind of talk about this more as the season progresses, where there are other players, whether it be Oladipo or potentially Blake Griffin, opting out and getting a new deal, that are going to be even more motivated now than ever to have a great year, to go into the summer of 2021 as a big-time free agent, because the list of those guys is getting much, much shorter in terms of big-time players in 2021. And for Oladipo specifically, this is a Pacers team that I'm not super high on at the moment, but if he's really good and he gets back to all-star or even all-NBA caliber form, this Pacers team could be a true threat at the top of the East, a top 4 or 5 seed. I mean, TJ Warren was awesome in the bubble. They've got Miles Turner, they've got Domantas Sabonis, they've got Malcolm Brogdon. And my pessimism about them as a playoff team this year didn't have a ton to do with the talent. It's just such a weird situation with not knowing what the future of Oladipo is going to be beyond this year. And I thought that maybe those kinds of things, in addition to having a new coach, could potentially hang over them. But if Oladipo is really good, he's absolutely an X-factor caliber player that could push this Pacers team, rather than sliding down the standings, a little bit up the standings in the Eastern Conference, and potentially a real threat to make the conference finals if he's really good this year. Now, if he kind of continues to struggle, if he's still kind of in the middle, I still think he's a bit of an X factor, but more so as a trade target for other teams that maybe have a better year than they thought that they would. They go out and they, go trade for Victor Oladipo because Indiana just doesn't think that he's going to stay, or they just don't think that he's that good anymore. So on either end of the spectrum there, Oladipo is definitely a player to keep an eye on this year. Next up now is a guy that I'm sure I'm going to be covering a ton this year. And it's Michael Porter Jr. of the Denver Nuggets. And he is the Nugget specific X factor, but he also kind of is maybe the biggest factor in determining how much of a threat the Nuggets are really going to be this year. If Michael Porter Jr. is a really, really good wing that can score, improves defensively, gives effort on both ends of the floor, and really fills that hole, the 3 spot that is currently on that Denver roster, they might be, the second best team in the entire Western Conference. They might be better than the Clippers. They might be just behind the Lakers and a true threat to win the title this year. Now, if that doesn't happen and maybe the development is a little bit slower, which would be understandable, he scores well, but maybe isn't as efficient as you'd like, and then defensively just doesn't bring everything that this Nuggets team is going to need, well, then that becomes a bit more of an issue for this Nuggets team. And that's the whole point of an X factor, right? It's like we can go one way or we can go the other, and it all kind of revolves around this one guy. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now for Michael Porter Jr. So he's definitely someone to keep an eye on within a Western Conference that's going to be really tough from top to bottom, but especially at the top when you're dealing with teams like the Clippers and the Lakers, potentially the Mavs being involved there as well. Denver is one of those teams that could absolutely challenge at the top of the West, but Michael Porter Jr. is going to need to be really, really good for them to truly contend at the top of that conference. Next up now is one that I didn't really think about a ton until I've seen the Nets in some of these preseason games, and it's Spencer Dinwiddie, and here's the reasoning. So I've talked a lot throughout this offseason about some of my concerns with this Nets roster, specifically as it relates to versatility in general and defensive versatility, size, someone at that combo 3-4 spot, because I felt like outside of Kevin Durant, they didn't really have someone that was going to kind of be everywhere defensively or just within the lineup in general. Could be up, could be down, could play the 1, could play the 3, could play the 4, whatever. And I felt like that was an issue on this roster. And if Kevin Durant isn't going to be like a really good defensive player for them, they're going to have some issues there. Those are still concerns that I have. However, I feel better about the Nets lineup now than I did in the offseason, now that I've kind of seen it for myself, because the idea of having Spencer Dinwiddie as the starting, one of the starting guards actually makes a lot more sense to me now, having actually seen it. Because in the past, I've considered Dinwiddie to be a bit more of just a scoring guy, right? Like that's mostly what he does. But he's shown a willingness to do other things for this Nets team, which allows Karis LeVert to be that bench scorer, and Dinwiddie to be kind of the Swiss Army knife in the starting lineup. You've got Kyrie, you've got Joe Harris, you've got Dinwiddie, you've got Durant, and then whoever starts at the 5. And Dinwiddie can be another on-ball creator, kicking it out to Kyrie and Kevin Durant. He can be someone that works off the ball as a shooter. He can be someone that works, off the ball but as a drive and kick guy. And then defensively, he's never going to be a great defender, but he does at least provide size, length, and versatility and activity at times. And maybe that's all that this lineup needs. And then LeVert is that guy off the bench. So maybe as much as I've been looking at other options to potentially unlock this lineup and this roster from a versatility standpoint, that's still something that I want to take a look at. But maybe Dinwiddie is a bit more of a factor there than I would have anticipated him being coming into the season, which makes him potentially a huge X factor for this Nets team that looks like they might be a bit more of a contender than people had originally thought. Again, just through a couple games preseason, health is still going to be a huge thing for this group. Second to last now is one that is hugely, hugely important for every team in the league this year, and it's Jrue Holiday on the Milwaukee Bucks. Because on paper, this Bucks team should be even better than they were last year. The addition of Jrue Holiday and the importance of that cannot be understated, especially as we get towards the postseason and the comparison between him and Eric Bledsoe as a postseason player. He's just much, much better. He's a better offensive player. He is a really good defender. Maybe you could make an argument about having a conversation between him and Bledsoe as defenders, because Bledsoe is really, really good. But regardless, that offensive end of the floor is going to be much better for Milwaukee from a perimeter creation standpoint, ideally, as long as Holiday is healthy. And that's the big question mark here, right? Is it just going to be a sunk cost of the assets they gave up in exchange for Holiday if he isn't healthy this year, whether that be in the regular season or the postseason? And if he is, I don't see any team in the Eastern Conference outside of maybe Brooklyn, depending on their health, that should realistically be able to challenge Milwaukee on paper. Now, we've said that in the past, and they still didn't make the finals, but that's where I'm at right now with Jrue Holiday, is he's the swing man on this roster. He's the one that raises or lowers the ceiling. And if he's really good, they're going to be really good. If he's not healthy, then they're still going to be a great team, but maybe not all the way at just like way, way above every other team in the Eastern Conference. The last up now is maybe the biggest swingman in the entire league, and that's Steph Curry. A guy that we haven't seen on a consistent basis in a little bit, and it's been unfortunate, the injury stuff. But we have to remember that this guy is a 2-time MVP, one of the most transcendent players the NBA's seen in the last decade, one of the best scorers the NBA's seen in the last decade, and someone that, if he's at the top of his game, if he's in MVP level form, in my opinion, adds the Warriors to the list of contenders in the Western Conference. Because because it's been a little bit since we've seen Steph, I think people are forgetting a little bit just how good he is. And with the other options this group has as well in the trade market to potentially bring in another player in the absence of Klay Thompson, with the Wiseman, with James Wiseman as an asset, and then the future Minnesota pick as well. If Steph Curry is back to MVP form, if he's like a first-team All-NBA caliber guy this year, that's a huge, huge difference maker for Golden State. And again, that makes him a huge X factor on this roster. And for all the teams in the league, they're not going to want to face, the championship pedigree that Golden State brings to the table. Now, it's also possible that he struggled with injuries and that team doesn't even make the playoffs. Like, that's how good the West is this year. But I would keep an eye on Steph as a possible X factor this year for Golden State. And yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. And once again, my name is Tucker. If you guys missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen here. I've been putting out a ton of content over the last month and a half or so, and I plan on continuing to do so with 2 videos every single day. So if you guys enjoy this type of content, if you did, then subscribe, like, as I said in the beginning of the video. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.